Well, hello, Nativity Bible Heads. It is Dr. Wayne, and it is time for Sunday Morning Power Bible Study. We're in the weeks after Pentecost. Today we get the text for proper 5B. We're going to have a reading from Samuel. We had a reading from Samuel last week, and then, of course, a psalm with that. Another reading from 2 Corinthians, and then we're back into Mark chapter 3. Now, remember in Samuel, remember there's 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel. Samuel only plays a character in these books for a few chapters, and then he exits. What this time in Israel is all about is transition from that time when they were those people who were, the nomadic tribal confederacy type thing, the judges and all of that, into a monarchy, okay? And we're getting into that transition right today. And we find out partially why. Last week, we had the calling of Samuel and his awakening to what it is that he was to be for God. As it turns out, we see Samuel as the last of the judges and the first of the prophets. But as chapter 8 will tell us, he had one thing in mind and the people had another thing in mind. Our actual passage in worship begins in chapter 8, verse 4, but we're going to read chapters 1 through 3 first. When Samuel became old, he made his sons judges over Israel. Yeah, so you see, Samuel is of the idea that, hey, we're just going to continue the way we have been. It wasn't, what's kind of odd here, though, is that the idea that judges were by primogeniture, by the fact that of who their dad was. We've never seen that with judges. You know who we do typically see that with? Monarchs, kings, right? So that's a curious little thing there that he had that intention. But stay tuned. The name of his firstborn son was Joel, and the name of his second, Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba. Now, Beersheba was the southernmost town in Judea, in the region of Judah. The next line is key. Yet his sons did not follow in his ways, but turned aside after gain. They took bribes and perverted justice. We heard the same kind of judgment because of the actions of Eli's sons. That's the priest that raised Samuel, and why the lineage didn't continue in Eli. And now we find out that, hey, it turns out Samuel's not the perfect father who teaches his kids the right way to go, and when they're old they will not depart from it. Apparently they did depart, okay? That's why when we start our passage here in verse 4, why we get this request. Stay tuned. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him. Now, Ramah, that's a town that's where Samuel made his home. He actually constructed an altar to the Lord. Remember, all this is before the temple gets built, which doesn't happen until, the king after David, which is Solomon, right? And said to him, okay, the elders came to Samuel. You are old, and your sons do not follow in your ways. All of these things that's why I wanted you to read, to hear the verses 1 through 3. So you see, like, this request wasn't, odd for them to be making at this time. You are old and your sons do not follow in your ways. Appoint for us then a king to govern us like other nations. Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is like other nations. The whole point behind Israel's existence is that they wouldn't be like other nations, right? And so consequently, the fact that they would request a king and cite this off the bat of, we want to be like else, it comes as like, are they elders? Do they really have what's best for, do they really have God's perspective on what God wants to do with Israel? This is what we're supposed to ask. Look at this, verse 6. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to govern us. Of course it would, right? He wanted his sons to continue, yada, yada. Well, Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, listen to the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them. So what is God doing here? Is God basically saying, it's just going to go too poorly for you if you resist this, so just go with it? Is God saying, I can make anything fine, so this isn't ideal, but I'm going to work through it anyway? Maybe. Just as they have done to me, this is God still speaking to Samuel, verse 8, just as they have done to me from the day I brought them up out of Egypt to this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so also they are doing to you. Yeah. So he's feeling it, right? Now then, listen to their voice only. You shall solemnly warn them and show them the ways of the king who shall reign over them. So it's like God is acceding to it, and it's like there's going to be a price to pay. Yeah, go ahead and do what they want, but I want you to be clear to them what is going to happen due to the fact that they're making this request. And it's like, it's like, so lest they ever come to you and say, oh, you never warned us this would happen. Well, here you can say, well, I told you so. Yeah, exactly. So Samuel reported all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, these will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots and to be his horsemen and to run before his chariots. This is a beginning of a long list of things that they're going to say. Now, we take verses 12, 13, and 14, and 15 out of the mix for our Sunday morning reading, but I'm going to go ahead and read them here. But he's basically saying, here's what's going to happen with the king. First of all, you got to fund the king. You got to fund the palace. You're going to have a military. You're going to have a set up, standing military. It's going to cost, okay? It's going to cost you dearly in terms of money. It's going to cost you dearly in terms of your offspring and what options your kids have to them. Listen. And he will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and some to plow his ground and to reap his harvest. You gotta maintain the palace, right, where the king lives, and to make his implements of war and the equipment of his chariots. Anytime chariots are mentioned, that's a very militaristic thing. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. Yeah, because opulency is the watchword for a king. How do you know a king's a real king? There's opulence to show it. And how do you get that opulence? By doing this, putting people into service of the king in that kind of a lifestyle, right? Verse 14, he will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive orchards and give them to his courtiers. He will take 1/10 of your grain and your vineyards and give it to his officers and his courtiers. Taxation, basically, is what he's talking about here. So, okay, this taxes are going to happen. So, like, you want to be like the nations? Okay, well, just know that this is all set. So, notice as we rejoin our Sunday passage here in verse 16, he will take your male and female slaves and the best of your cattle and donkeys and put them to his work. Again, maintaining an opulent lifestyle for the king is vital. If you're going to have a king, you got to show it. You got to be the part, right? He will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you shall be his slaves. And in that day you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. Yeah. A dire warning, right? as it turns out, all of these things that get listed, this is a bullet point list of what goes wrong during the reign of Solomon. Solomon is just this, well, Saul and then David. The second king after Saul. Spoiler: Saul's going to get anointed king here at the end of this passage. But the idea here is that he's warning for them what the consequences will be because of this choice. And God's not saying, well, I'm not going to allow this. No, God says, oh, I will allow it. Choices have circumstances. These are the circumstances. And as it turns out, he nails it because all of this does come about during Solomon's time. But the people refused to listen to... did I finish that? And in that day you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. Okay. You know how your parent will sometimes make threats like, if you don't stop it, I'm going to turn this car around, or stuff like that. Well, the Lord will not answer you in that day. Well, the Lord will answer, but this is the nature of warnings, is that you say, like, don't count on it. Don't you dare count on, like, oh, we've got a backup plan. No, you're not making a backup plan. You're just going with your own personal motivation. Verse 19. But the people refused to listen to the voice of Samuel. They said, no, but we are determined to have a king over us, so that we may also be like other nations, and that our king may govern us and go out before us and fight our battles. See, the most ancient concept of who Yahweh was supposed to be for Israel was their mighty celestial warrior, okay? And in this selecting of a king, they're replacing Yahweh, the divine celestial warrior, with the king, yeah. When Samuel had heard all the words of the people, he repeated them in the ears of the Lord. The Lord said to Samuel, listen to their voice and set a king over them. Samuel then said to the people of Israel, each of you return home. Now, is that where, that's great, that was verse 22. Oh, I think I went a little overboard there, verses 21 and 22. Now we're just going to skip to the denouement of it all, the unraveling of it all, and we skip to basically all the way to chapter 11, verses 14 and 15. And what do we have? Samuel said to the people, come, let us go to Gilgal and there renew the kingship. Gilgal was one of the places that Samuel visited during his circuit, during his time as judge. And there renew the kingship. So all the people went to Gilgal, and there they made Saul king before the Lord in Gilgal. There they sacrificed offerings of well-being before the Lord, and there Saul and all the Israelites rejoiced greatly. So we have the carrying out of all of that. As we move on to the psalm, remember the psalm pairs well, kind of like a fine wine with your, whatever meat you're having, pairs well with that reading. So here we have it in Psalm 138. I will give thanks to you, O Lord, with my whole heart. Before the gods I will sing your praise. I will bow down toward your holy temple and praise your name because of your love and faithfulness. We have, obviously, here a psalm of thanksgiving, yes? For you have glorified your name and your word above all things. When I called, you answered me. You increased my strength within me. All the kings of the earth will praise you, O Lord, when they have heard the words of your mouth. They will sing of the ways of the Lord, that great is the glory of the Lord. Though the Lord be high, he cares for the lowly. He perceives the haughty from afar. This could be put in through the mouth of, if you think about it, Samuel, if he was to actually do an expression of gratitude over everything that's happening, right? Though I walk in the midst of trouble, you keep me safe. You stretch forth your hand against the fury of my enemies. Your right hand shall save me. Yeah, Samuel, he needed this kind of comfort because of the fact that he is doing what God told him to do, even though it's not the ideal thing for everyone. But still, God told him to do it. And so this is an expression of thanksgiving and faith, an expression of faithfulness, right? The Lord will make good his purpose for me. O Lord, your love endures forever. Do not abandon the works of your hands. So as Israel is careening into this realm of being like the other nations, we get this psalm, which you could, I hope you can see it as an expression coming from Samuel and like in the best picture of what he could be hoping for, because he knows, so, oh Lord, the Lord will make good his purpose. Yeah, the monarchy was not God's purpose, but the Lord said, go with it, what they say. There will be consequences. And the Lord uses our choices that aren't in his direction to give us wisdom. This is how we become smarter in our older age, folks. This is how we get that experience in life that then enables us to have authority in the realm of, no, let me give you a little insight here, or let me give you some advice. And if you're into giving advice, always God is available to help us through our worst choices, okay? And that is what this is a thanksgiving for. It's like, no matter what has been done, because God is with me, I know somehow we can make this into something good and grand even. All right, let's move along. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 13 to chapter 5, verse 1. Now, remember, the thing that we want to always keep in mind with regard to 2 Corinthians is that what we have here is a letter to this same church that we had 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians, he was answering a whole bunch of questions about that they had for him. This is Paul really standing up to an anti-Paul relapse, not relapse, but kickback, kind of a reflex. Because some other teachers had come in and had kind of like stolen their hearts and gotten them all googly-eyed and amazed. And it's like, oh, well, so consequently, Paul has to defend himself. He has to defend his apostleship. He has to defend, how he's been teaching to them. He has been experiencing and talking about his experiences of the persecution he has undergone for his choices of being an apostle. And he tries to continually put it back onto the church to say, the gospel is the reason why I'm willing to go through all this for you. That's how much I believe in this gospel. That's how much the gospel I preach to you is the real gospel. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, 13 to chapter 5, verse 1. Just as we have the same spirit of faith that is in accordance with Scripture, I believed, and so I spoke. It's a quote, I think, from Psalms or something like that. We also believe, and so we speak. See, defending why they're saying what they're saying. Because we know that the one who raised the Lord Jesus will raise us also with Jesus and will bring us with you into his presence. Remember, in this time after Pentecost, we're celebrating what's possible for us because of the resurrection. That's what we're getting here also, right? Yes, everything is for your sake, so that grace, as it extends to more and more people, may increase thanksgiving to the glory of God. You want to think about the reason why Paul's motivation was that so many people hear of the gospel is because, not because it's like he was thinking like, Oh, it's important that we're all on the same page. It's important that we all have the same religion. You know, that wasn't his motivation. His motivation was that the news of what God has done through Christ is so compelling, that if you hear, you just simply hearing about it, it's going to bring in you a response of thanksgiving. And so that's what he states as the raison d'etre, that it may increase thanksgiving to the glory of God. The idea that hearing what God has done for us and what's promised for us, how that's good news for us, what that does is create for us a response of thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is the root of those good works then that follow. Get that? Thanksgiving. Our good works are the manifestation of our thanksgiving. Not just merely saying thanks, but then in the way we live, the way we treat others, and the things that we devote our time and our money to, right? So we do not lose heart. Remember, he's and his co-workers had been experiencing some persecution. He'd even been put in jail a couple times, maybe in Ephesus as well. The end time when he, at the end of Acts, where he's finally in Rome and he's under house arrest. That's not the first time he was arrested. He went through some other things here and there. Thessalonica as well. Even though our outer nature is wasting away, our inner nature is being renewed day by day. Outer nature, he's referring to our flesh and bones, right? The idea that, yes, we're getting older. Yes, we're suffering punishment. Yes, that's uncomfortable. But you know what? All of this is just temporary. And our inner nature is being renewed day by day. Day by day. Not just it has been renewed, but it is being daily renewed. It is going on. This is a wonderful expression of good news. Talk about gospel being good news. Here's good news. You are being renewed day by day, every day. And unless we make ourselves available to that experience by our practices, we'll miss out on the fact that we are being renewed day by day. For this slight momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all measure. Yeah, see, his things like, hey, this is a small price to pay for what's coming up. Because we look not at what can be seen, but at what cannot be seen. Oh, yeah, the old, if you can see it, is it real? Or does it have to be, for it to be real, does it have to be something you see? Yeah. For what can be seen is temporary, but what cannot be seen is eternal. Yeah. This world versus the next. Okay? For we know that if the earthly tent we live in is destroyed, when he says earthly tent, he's talking about our bodies, right? Our fleshly bodies. Nothing, not that there's anything wrong with your body. There's nothing wrong with having a body, being a body. There's nothing inherently sinful about bodiliness. It's just simply, it's something that's temporal. It's got a time limit on it. We have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. Wonderful little reminder from the Apostle Paul, right? With regard to the exigencies of this life, not necessarily meaning that, what is promised isn't going to happen. It just means that, that's what we got to go through to get there, right? Mark chapter 3, verses 20 to 35. Now, in Mark, was last week we dealt with, he was having some conflict issues with the leaders of his religion. And here today we see another bit of the aftermath. He had popularity, then he had kickback. Now we have popularity and kickback happening in the same place. Take note. Mark chapter 3, verses 20 to 35. The crowd came together again so that Jesus and his disciples could not even eat. So the popularity that he had and the positive responses he was drawing from the people had an impact on their ability to take care of themselves, right? When his family heard it, they went out to restrain him. For people were saying, he has gone out of his mind. Yeah, we don't get a whole lot in the Gospel of Mark, or any of the Gospels for that matter, regarding Jesus' earthly family. But here's probably the closest, one of the few times that we actually do get a little glimpse, right? And the scribes who came down from Jerusalem said, notice how it's changing to another story. We're going to come back to this thing about him not eating and the fact that his family heard about this. Now we're going to have a different story intercalated between there. It's like a little sandwiching kind of a thing that Mark likes to do. He's going to come back to that episode, but this is where he inserts some conflict. Okay, so popularity and conflict. Now it's being intercalated. The scribes who came down from Jerusalem said, he has Beelzebul, and by the ruler of the demons, he casts out demons. And he called them to him and spoke to them in parables. How can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand. What was that thing that Benjamin Franklin said? If we don't hang together, we will certainly hang separately. That kind of thing. It's like, okay. And Lincoln quoted this, right? He cannot stand, but his end has come. But no one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his property without first tying up the strong man. Then indeed the house can be plundered. Jesus is pointing out the ridiculousness of the assertion that they're making that he's in somehow league with Beelzebul. It's like, makes no logical sense why I would be in league with Beelzebul, because if I were in league with Beelzebul, why would I be casting out my minions? Why would I be wanting to destroy my minions? Why wouldn't I want my minions to be in the people, right? So it's like, to be casting out demons because I have that demon, that sounds a little wacky. So Jesus points out, no, you got it all wrong. I'm the boss of the house. I'm like the master of the house. Yes, that's what he is. No one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his property without first tying up the strong man. So Jesus is saying, like, hey, I'm binding up Satan, okay, in order by releasing the minions, okay, by the exorcisms and such, and then indeed the house can be plundered. So it's like, yeah, you guys got it all wrong. I'm not in league with Satan. I'm the one who's like doing battle with and winning, okay? Truly, I tell you, people will be forgiven for their sins and whatever blasphemies they utter, but whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit can never have forgiveness, but is guilty of an eternal sin. For they had said, he has an unclean spirit. All right, let's get into what this is about here. So notice notice the word blasphemy. You've heard blasphemy. What is blasphemy? Well, here, one of the things we need to recognize, this is one of those untranslated words that we have in Scripture. Yeah, it's untranslated. Blaspheme, that's the word in Greek. And it's like, didn't have a word for that in English, so let's just keep that word. Kind of like baptize, right? Blasphemy is the same kind of a thing in that it's an untranslated word. So what does it mean? Well, here it's specifically being defined in a way that says that when you say that something is not of God, like for example, well here, you've got Jesus acting as God, doing those things from the space of love, from the space of God. And people are seeing what he's doing and saying, that ain't God, that's the devil. Notice this is the blasphemy he's talking about. Seeing God at action in the world and pointing to it and saying, that ain't God, but it really is God. That's your blasphemy. That's what he's talking about. Because they had said he has an unclean spirit. No, Jesus did not have an unclean spirit. He had the Spirit of God. He was the Son of God. So consequently, when Jesus is saying these things, he's pointing out that the only way somebody can miss out on what God is doing in the world is by being unwilling to recognize God when God is actually taking action. And it will probably come through an agency that you don't like. Right? Here, that's the case, okay? Then his mother and brothers came. Remember, we had this thing at the beginning. It said that his family had heard of the fact that he was not even able to eat, right? Then his mother and his brothers came, and we definitely want to get that this, mother and brother, this is biological, that we're talking about biological mother and biological brothers, right? And standing outside, they sent to him and called him. Now, notice how they didn't come all the way in. So we get this picture of distance between Jesus and his biological family, right? And we should, because when we're getting a picture of Jesus as Son of God, Mark is going to use, to try to create a separation of some sort in order for us to totally get his divinity, right? This is a little bit symbolic of that kind of thing. A crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, notice they were the ones who were they're closer to Jesus in terms of believing him and being interested in what he has to say. This family, not so much, right? The crowd that was sitting around him, they said to him, "Your mother and your brothers and sisters are outside asking for you." And he replied, don't judge Jesus for this, but he said, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" Jesus knew that he had to separate himself from that which most people were able to, nestle in life with, the glories of life, the glories of family, the glories of companionship, the glories of that kind of thing. Jesus knew that he couldn't see that as anything that was going to stop him from fulfilling what God wanted him to be and who God wanted him what God wanted him to do and who God wanted him to be. He replied, "Well, who are my mother and my brothers?" And looking at those who sat around him, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." Jesus isn't excluding his biological family. What he's doing is he's throwing open at the widest possible understanding of it, throwing open that everybody can be in his family. All right, everybody can be that close relationship to Jesus. What a great thing, right? This is what Mark is trying to convey, is that Jesus is for the whole world. Jesus isn't just the property of a biological set or even just an ethnic entity out there. Jesus is somebody who's intending to expand to the whole world. And that's the idea behind the direction the gospel is going for Mark, for the Gospels, and then we see that play out in the book of Acts, do we not? That is it for this in the Sundays after Pentecost, proper 5B. Until next week, we'll see you in church. Bye-bye.